So we're going to play some really quick sound. For those of you who are joining us, it is day 13 of Trump on trial. We are inside the courtroom. We welcome you to drop your questions in the chat. We will get to them as you've been seeing, but we're going to play a little bit of sound right now just to set the table for you guys. This is Stormy Daniels on The View. And so it's not just Donald Trump that has prior statements, audioed, videoed, etc., that can be used against him. There's some prior statements that even Stormy Daniels has given. So let's take a really quick listen to it now.
Are you ready to take the stand against Donald Trump? And yeah. I don't want you to talk about what you're going to say or anything about the trial. That's my lawyer hat on. But are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready. I've been ready. I'm hoping with all of my heart that they call me because, as I showed on the stand against Michael Avenatti, I don't need someone to speak for me. Mm-hmm. And I relish the day that I get to face him and speak my truth.
I mean, this question I'm going to offer up to you, Molly, right? So she's on The View. This is Stormy Daniels. She's relishing her time on the witness stand. According to Hugo, she has been relishing it, but at some points, she's also shown what Hugo says and what other people have indicated inside the courtroom. She's shown a level of emotion that shows that she's raw and being honest about what is going on. But do things like this View interview, do you think that's a backfiring event that the prosecution needs to be nervous about? Because Susan Necheles just got started today. She's got, I think, Christy, you're welcome, and Dave, you're welcome to disagree with me, but I feel like she's got a lot more to go in terms of her cross.
I think that two things can be true. That Stormy Daniels can be a woman who has been mistreated by Trump, and that Stormy Daniels can be a woman who spent the last 7 years, like Michael Cohen, sort of dining out on this experience, right? So both things are true. Why Pecker is such a good witness is because he does not have 7 years of that, right? Or 6 years of that. Pecker is just a witness who can place Trump at this, at this scene, who can substantiate that he killed stories, who can sort of explain that Trump knew what was happening. And that is a really important story. But, the people you get, the woman you write the hush money check to is never going to be a Supreme Court justice. I mean, that's just the circumstances of the thing. And your personal fixer is never going to be, that's always going to be people who perhaps are not the great, the most, have the sort of most upstanding bona fides. But she does have a story, and she is, a lot, and her story really tracks with a lot of these other women's experience with Trump. So I think, both things can be true. I think she can be, that we can feel for her, but also that she is an imperfect, like Michael Cohen, an imperfect messenger in this situation.
Yeah,
hey,
David,
Katie, can I add one thing to what Molly said earlier?
Yeah,
she made a really good point on the Access Hollywood tape, which is, it sounded like what Stormy Daniels was describing in court is what Donald Trump said to Access Hollywood he could do. And I think that is incredibly damaging.
Yeah, and Dave Ehrenberg, I want to jump to you for a second here because the day technically didn't start with Stormy Daniels, right? The day started with a woman named Sally Franklin, who is an executive at a publishing house, and she was used as a custodian of records to be able to introduce into evidence 2 of Trump's books. She's the ghostwriter for 2 of his books. And she was used to be able to introduce excerpts of those books into the record. Why was that so important, Dave, for the jury to hear those excerpts about Trump's frugality, his penny pinching, and his level of micromanagement style?
Katie, it's important because it's a continuation of the very important testimony from yesterday of Jeffrey McConney, the comptroller of the Trump organization, who testified that Trump was a micromanager, that he expected McConney to negotiate down all the bills. He wouldn't just sign any bill automatically. He wanted to be negotiated. He threatened to fire McConney, even jokingly fired him for paying the bills as is. So now you're expecting us to believe that Trump just signed off on Michael Cohen's monthly retainer fees, which were way higher than the $130,000 he was owed. Because why? Trump did it because he knew what this was about. He knew it because it was not legal fees. It was a reimbursement. It was a reimbursement plus taxes plus a VIG on top of bonus plus other fees. So that's why this is all important. And although we have not seen direct evidence yet that ties Trump to the actual falsification of the business records, we've now seen a lot of corroborating information, some circumstantial evidence that will help Michael Cohen, who will be the one person who will provide that direct evidence. So what prosecutors are doing are creating this firewall and trying to find the last piece of the puzzle to tie Trump directly to the falsification of business records. And they can't just rely on Michael Cohen as is. That's where the firewall comes in. They're protecting Michael Cohen to give him enough corroboration in advance of his testimony.
You know, Christy, do you see rhyme or reason in terms of witness order here? I mean, would you not be surprised then to have Michael Cohen be the next one to be called by the prosecution in this case? I mean, there's a little bit of whiplash, I guess. You have an entire day yesterday of just, you know, they were still very interesting and still compelling, but not as obviously sexy or lurid witnesses like Jeff McConney, et cetera, right? Or Deborah Tarasoff from the Trump Organization, but they're the paper trail witnesses. They're the ones that are, you know, further solidifying the documentary paper trail of the falsification. And then we jump pretty hardcore to, I guess that was no pun intended, to Stormy Daniels today. So, you know, do you see or detect any type of rhyme or reason here in terms of witness order?
I think the prosecution has done a really great job in terms of how they've been ordering their witnesses. I think starting with David Pecker, somebody who had direct communications with Donald Trump, who could speak to those communications about the hush money payments for Dino the doorman and for Karen McDougal. I thought that was really smart to set the stage, explain catch and kill, how it worked, and then to move into Keith Davidson, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, again, about the logistics of how the agreements came about and his understanding of the timing and how it mattered for the election. Again, a lot of corroboration for what Pecker said, so that Donald Trump was thanking him after the fact because this would have been really damaging for the campaign if it had gotten out. And now you had Hope Hicks, again, sort of had that mic drop moment again, where she said the same thing. You're hearing just a lot of corroboration. And again, from people who are friendly to Trump. And now that we've gotten past David Pecker, who is complimentary to Trump, and Hope Hicks, who also is complimentary to Trump, now we're getting to the witnesses who are not so complimentary to Trump, but who are still saying the same thing. You know, Stormy Daniels testified today. I thought that that they kept delaying the payment to me, it wasn't going to get done because after the election, he wouldn't want to pay. So that key point that the prosecution needs to make, they've made it, and they've corroborated, I think, maybe the more troubling witnesses who do have, you know, somewhat of an axe to grind, right? They don't like Trump and they're vocal about it. They've softened the blow of that by having these more credible witnesses who did like Trump say the same things already. I think in terms of next witnesses, I think we're going to hear, obviously, from Stormy Daniels is back on the stand on Thursday. I've heard that we may be hearing from Madeleine Westerhout, who was an executive assistant to Donald Trump in the White House. And I think you'll also hear back from a paralegal from the state who will talk about more of the social media. My suspicion is that they're not going to have Michael Cohen necessarily start on a Friday where he would be kind of over the weekend. My guess is we'll start with him sometime next week, but we'll see.
We have a good question that just came in from one of our viewers from DMAC. We're going to bring in Adam Reiss, one of our amazing producers from MSNBC, NBC. Adam Reiss is always, the tip of spear when it comes to all things Trump inside the courtroom. Adam, we got a great question for you from our viewer, DMAC. Will they call, they being the prosecution, Karen McDougal to the stand?
I think it's unlikely. The charges really focus on Stormy Daniels, and that's why we heard her at length today. I don't think it's necessary to bring in Karen McDougal. It would be added gravy, so to say. But we've seen the prosecutors keep this case very tight, just like they did with Trump Corp, Trump Payroll Corp. They're keeping it to the bare minimum, just the witnesses that they need to tell the story. And as several of your guests have already said, they're doing it very well. The pacing, they're bringing in key witnesses, and in between each witness, they're adding information. For instance, today we had the executive from Ballantine talking about Mr. Trump, writing in his books, in his own words, how frugal he is, how he would get a check for 50 cents and cash it. This is all adding on to previous testimony from David Pecker to Keith Davidson to Hope Hicks, and now, such a powerful witness in Stormy Daniels. I think we're just coming to the end. We'll hear more from Stormy, maybe some investigators or Madeleine Westerhout to talk about the checks. in the Oval Office, being signed, sent back to Trump Tower, and then Michael Cohen next week. And they've told us that they'll be wrapped by 2 weeks from today. And so I think they're on schedule.
Yeah. So Adam, let's stay on that a little bit. Do you have any indication for our viewers that are tuning in, whether or not kind of Christie's guess, and I don't know, maybe yours is less than a guess, wink, wink, that maybe Michael Cohen could be expected on the stand next week?
I think Christie's right. I don't think they want to bring him in on a Friday. I think we've got plenty more of cross on Stormy from Susan Nichols. She's hitting her hard. I think that she was very upset by direct. I know it wasn't enough for Judge Merchan, her objection. She said, he was objecting for her, but she was objecting consistently. And I've never seen Susan Hoffinger being under pressure as much as I saw today. She's a solid prosecutor, and she was really under a lot of pressure because Susan Nichols was objecting so often. So I do think that we'll wrap the week up with maybe a Madeline Westerhood and another paralegal. And then next week, I think we only have 3 days next week. I think all 3 days could be taken up with Michael Cohen.
Yeah, Adam, before I leave with you, what days are going to be expected for trial next week?
I think Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. We don't have Wednesday. And Friday the 17th, Donald Trump says he wants to go to Barron's graduation, but we learned today from various news reports that he could actually be going to a rally. However, I wouldn't jump to conclusions. It's possible he could do both.
Yeah, it is possible that he could do both. We did have another viewer question that came in from Chuck Rod. Another great name, by the way. Chuck Rod has a question. Was there any reaction on the jurors on a specific topic Stormy Daniels was talking about? Hugo, I'm going to go to you on this one. Did you see any visible reaction kind of perceived by the jurors when it came to some specific kind of topics that Stormy Daniels was talking about?
Yeah, I'm not the person to ask, actually. I was in the overflow room, and just to kind of give you an outline of how this works, there's the actual courtroom where you have a view of the jury, but you don't have a view of Trump. Meanwhile, in the overflow room, you have a view of Trump, but you don't have a view of the jury. In fact, you don't even see the jurors walk in. And so stationed in the overflow room, I don't have a direct kind of first-hand account of how the jury responded. I mean, we do have a note from, I do have a note from my colleague at The Guardian that they were particularly interested in the description of the Lake Tahoe hotel and that they were taking notes. But beyond that, it's tricky for me to say. I don't know if Adam and his NBC colleagues. Yeah.
I would just add that she was directing her testimony directly to the jury, and it was compelling. It was riveting. Donald Trump, when she walked in, he caught a glance of her both times, when she came in for the first time and when she came in after lunch. He clearly wanted to get a glimpse of her, because you can't necessarily see her on the witness stand, and she can't necessarily see him. In fact, when she was asked by Susan Hoffinger to identify him, she actually had to stand up from the witness seat to point him out. And I can also say that Eric Trump, well, as much as he was trying to avoid being seen as taking any glimpses of her, both he and his father were looking up at the monitor as she was testifying to get a glimpse.
And that dog agreed. I don't know if that was Molly's dog or not. Molly has to jump, so we want to say goodbye and thank you to Molly Jong Fast, as always, for your compelling insight. We appreciate you, Molly. Molly's going to say goodbye. Guys, for those of you that are joining us again, this is our YouTube live stream. This is day 13 of Trump on trial, the New York election interference trial. And I always call it that because that's exactly what it is. It is an election interference trial. And so I'm going to stick on this for a second and go to you, Christy, because I think because it is an election interference trial and because we are now in the midst of some pretty compelling testimony from Stormy Daniels, the jurors are taking notes. That's something that we definitely know. The jurors are furiously taking notes, according to Adam Reiss, as well as we just heard right now. They are paying very close attention to what is going on. Is there any concern at all that you have at this point, Christy, that the defense will move when they do, not if, for a motion for judgment of acquittal, meaning they're going to ask at the end of the prosecution's case in chief that the court dismiss the case for the prosecution's failure to actually meet the elements of the crime. Have you heard anything, or do you think there's anything missing right now that would hurt the prosecution so far?
Well, I think we still have more evidence to get to. I think in particular, we're going to need Michael Cohen for some of this to really connect some of the dots, to be able to say that that he had discussions with Donald Trump, that he had discussions with Alan Weisselberg about arranging these payments to be made, both to Karen McDougal and then ultimately to Stormy Daniels, which is charged. That piece of it, we got a lot of the falsified business records yesterday. And under the law, there was a lot of questioning from defense, I think, trying to make things complicated. Well, Donald Trump isn't in the system. He doesn't know these records. He's at the White House. He's not involved. Well, he doesn't need to be making the invoices and looking at the general ledger, but he has to have been the one to have caused that to happen. He has to have been the one to, even if indirectly, have caused these business records to be false and known that to be the case. So that piece of it, I think we still want Michael Cohen to kind of connect those dots and make it clear that, yes, here are my conversations with Donald Trump where he understood this was going to happen. The notes that we saw from Alan Weisselberg about grossing up the income that was going to be paid to Michael Cohen. How did that come about? Did he discuss that with Donald Trump? Like, those conversations about the nitty gritty of some of this, I think is going to be really interesting to hear from Michael Cohen's testimony.